a kind of ceramic tile normally found in Moroccan mosques.
Casablanca delivers all the whitewash style you expect from Art Deco, but adds patterns inspired by Islam. Egged on by minted clients and a lack of regulation, Casa's architects pushed the style to new extremes. When it went up in 1950, the Liberté building was Africa's first high-rise. For a period between the wars, Casablanca was Art Deco's cutting edge and North Africa's coolest city. But it's no Miami. Pollution and a lack of cash means much of Casablanca looks really run down. But the city is now waking up to the value of its deco designs. The Cathedral of the Sacred Heart was neglected for years. Designed in 1930, it had become a target for vandals and a home to squatters. Now it's being done up again and hosts fashion shows and concerts. The quirky stained glass windows by the architect's wife owe an obvious debt to Zillage mosaic.
Can you imagine what it must have been like when it was spotted? What a pad to be brought back to.
Casablanca has the best French restaurants in Africa, but also excels at traditional Moroccan food in authentic surroundings. Almunia opened in the 1950s and serves specialties like couscous. The food's better than the crockery though, which looks like something your gran would bring back from Benidorm. But the interior is the real attraction. The carved plasterwork, Zillage mosaic and painted ceiling were handcrafted on site. It took 2 years to create. For a Muslim country, there's a surprisingly big drinking culture in Morocco. But Casa's a port, so most of its boozes are dive bars, better for brawling than drinking. Of all the gin joints, Mystic Garden's the stylish newcomer. It pulls in discerning locals and trendy tourists.
After the war, French influence began to wane, and Casa's super rich headed out of the city for a seaside suburb which became Casablanca's Beverly Hills.
Anfa's residents competed with each other by getting the biggest names in avant-garde architecture to build their villas. They were as well-travelled as they were well-off. Turning their back on local tradition, they looked to California and Scandinavia for inspiration. This is one of the wildest. Inspired by Niemeyer's Brasilia, it was built by Wolfgang Uwerth, a graduate of the Bauhaus. It's a traditional Moroccan salon, but 60s style. Local kids nicknamed it the Camembert and started an urban myth that the building revolved very, very slowly. But Casa's biggest architectural attraction is the Hassan II Mosque. Completed just 10 years ago, it can hold 25,000 worshippers in a room 3 times the size of St. Paul's. And there's room for 85,000 more on the esplanade outside. Its minaret is the world's tallest at 200 metres, and at night a green laser shines out pointing the way to Mecca, except whilst we were there when it was broken. It's one of only 2 mosques in Morocco which non-Muslims can visit.
Inside, everything's Moroccan. The marble comes from Agadir, the granite from Tafraout, and the cedar from the Atlas Mountains. Only the chandeliers are imported from Venice. The whole place is amazingly high-tech. There's underfloor heating to keep your feet warm, and in the summer, the whole roof retracts, turning the entire place into a huge open-air prayer stadium.
It took 2,500 craftsmen 13 years to build and was paid for by public donation. Just about every Moroccan owns a piece, a source of great national pride, even more so because it eclipses everything the French colonists ever built. It's hard to believe that it dates from the 1980s. Downstairs, there are vast rooms dedicated to ritual ablutions. And it's the only mosque in the world to have its own swimming pool. This isn't the North Africa you read about in glossy magazines, but there's a real buzz here. You have to work a bit harder, but it's worth it. Casablanca might be a household name, but it's the incredible buildings here that really deserve to be famous.
Sometime next year, the wrap should finally come off Scotland's spanking new Parliament in the middle of Edinburgh. But when so many people don't give a toss about politics, can new buildings like this one restore our faith? Or are MPs just building themselves new palaces to play in? Building a parliament is a serious challenge. How do you respect the past, project an air of solidity to show that this is the very heart of a nation, but also show you're a happy, open, forward-looking democracy? And is any design good enough to make people trust politicians again? Back in the early days of Blair's New Britain, plans for the Scottish and Welsh Parliament buildings were unveiled in a blaze of publicity. Unfortunately, the initial enthusiasm has been completely drowned out in bad press. And you can see why. The Scottish Parliament is not only 2 years overdue, it's a staggering 10 times over budget. And the fantastic vision for a Welsh Assembly, which should have become a reality this year, is still just a hole in the ground. Apparently, it's now due in 2005, so just don't hold your breath. Even the British Parliament wasn't finished until 24 years after the original deadline, but at least it achieved what new political buildings aim to do, became a symbol of the country. Now, though, it stands for many of the problems with politics. It's forbidding, old-fashioned and self-important. If we were building it today, you'd imagine we'd build something that represented a more democratic and open style of government. But Portcullis House, only recently built next door to house MPs, is firmly stuck in the fortress mentality, just like many of our so-called representatives who work in it. Westminster's architecture matters. It's more than just a backdrop for news reports. The style of the building sets the tone for what goes on inside.
Coming here as an MP, you realise that architecture is politics. The architecture of this building is supposed to give you a message that you're at the centre of the world and what you do and say is very important.
Do you think that says something about the British political system?
Oh, well, certainly the British political system when this was built. You know, that MPs were up there and the rest of you were like mice who could come into this vaulted cathedral and admire us from afar. It's a building not designed to be accessible, not designed to be transparent, but designed for MPs to